Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Bales Sport Collective. My name's Randy Bales, and tonight I have Dylan Jacob with me tonight. We've got a cool car behind us, is to say the least. Dylan, thank you for coming out.
I appreciate you having me. I've had a blast ripping this thing and putting it to the test.
So I spent 2 hours today when I could have been doing something else with a grin, ear to ear, backblading and everything, the entire circumference of the ranch, just so you could have a smooth surface. I know we were texting back and forth on whether you were going to be able to come tonight, on whether you should drive the street tires that you had just put on, and I felt bad. And you're going to put the off-road tires back on so you could have some more clearance and more traction. But I don't think you got any more traction tonight.
I don't think I got any more traction. I mean, I think it would have been arguably worse had I done the street tires. But yeah, I mean, this thing, it has so much torque. And, you know, we talked earlier about how, you know, the platform that's in it, like, the power is kind of irrelevant off-road. Like, the entire time tonight was
You're
like
learning the car.
Redlining, you know.
Yeah, we're watching you
every
spin the
second.
tires. So we had a lot of fun for the past couple hours, ripping around, taking shots that you guys are obviously going to see in a car that's relatively new to him and probably new to the internet for the most part. Not maybe a popularly searched car for a video like this. But as soon as I saw a photo of it, I was like, how do we get him to be ripping on I'll make you a track. Show up tonight. Tell me about the car.
Yeah, the Sierra car is super unique. Like, I didn't know anything about them. I saw, I was passing Georgetown Lake like 3 or 4 years ago, and I saw them out there racing, and I pulled in, started talking to them. I'm like, what is this thing? What are you guys doing? And it was Nitro Circus. They were out there and they had created like a little like track on Georgetown Lake, and they had the studded tires on the Sierra cars. They had like 4 of them, and they're like, hey, we're going to be out here next weekend. You can actually like drive the car if you want to. So I followed them on Instagram, started chatting with them. My wife and I went out and we got to race for like an hour each in our own cars on Georgetown Lake on the circuit that they set up. And I was like, one day I'm going to buy one of these things.
So Sierra cars, just so you know, your demo day's work, because this guy's driving by, comes out. Now, yours is a little bit unique compared to what they're making right now, correct?
It is, yeah. So John McGinnis owned this car originally. This was their alpha car. So they, like, all of the testing that they did in these cars, they did in this car. And then when he bought it, he put a Radical Performance 1500cc Hayabusa engine in it. It's fully built, put air shifters, upgraded everything on this car. He competed in Pikes Peak, so this car has ran Pikes Peak, and he did a ton of other stuff with the car. And then a guy in Utah ended up buying the car from him like 2 years ago, and then that was who I bought the car from. So it's
Excellent.
traded a couple times.
And they only make EV now.
They do only do EV. So this is one of the, I think it's one of like 30 RX3s that exist.
Okay.
And I'm one of one with this platform.
Other than the Hayabusa motor, did they put any other gas motors in them?
You know, there's 2 different models. So the RX3 is the higher end. And then like the one my wife drove, I remember it being vividly, because I drove it too, like much slower. So I don't know what platform is in that, but probably like a Gixxer engine, because it was pretty slow in comparison. Mm-hmm. But the RX3 was kind of their like top of the line. Because their base model, the one that I was just talking about, was like 40 grand. And the RX3 was like 60 when they first came out.
Cheap thrills relatively, right?
Yeah.
I like that we have still some of the organic native grasses that are shoved in the intakes right now for that motor. I still can't get over how much fun. I didn't even get to drive the car, and I was so enthusiastic about seeing it go over the berms and everything else like that. There were a couple times that I didn't hear you, and I was like, oh, please tell me you didn't go send it too hard. And then I see over there, just, oh my gosh, having so much fun. So thank you for bringing it out. How many horsepower is it running?
It is 225, and it weighs about 925 pounds.
Okay. Do you know the power to weight ratio on that? Can you do math that fast?
Like in between 1 and 3 and 1 and 4.
Okay, yeah, and we watched it happen tonight. So you were saying that it had that horsepower, but the other model only had like 180, and I was saying it doesn't need more than 180, I think. But of course, we all want that because it's and you add the driver mod into that, right?
Yeah, I've seen videos of this car run in Pikes Peak with drag radials on it, and that power comes into play then. But off-road with these off-road tires, I had no chance, and the dusty.
You have a street setup for it.
I do, yeah.
Do you know what tires are on it?
I don't. They're like 13-inch. So these are Alpha Racing tires, and these the studded tires I have are also from Alpha. And then the 13-inch wheel setup that I have for both the radials and the street tires, I don't know what they are actually off the top of my head.
I'd be curious. I always like tire compound talks and everything else like that. But you also changed the suspension.
Yeah, we had the original suspension that was in here was I honestly forget what it was, but so the one of the original engineers that worked at Sierra Cars left and created his own shop in Utah, and so when I bought this car, well, first of all, like when I got into the market for a Sierra car about a year ago, and I was like, I want to make it street legal. So that was like kind of the base case. It was like, I want to find one. I want to make it street legal. I want to figure out who can make it street legal.
Take the least most practical car and make it a little bit more practical.
Yeah, exactly. Because I was like, I had snapped my wrist back in February. I had to get like 9 screws put in on my dirt bike and a plate. And I was like, my friend said with age comes a cage. But I was like, I had been looking for a Sierra car, and then I accelerated my search because I was like, okay, like I'm kind of done with my dirt bike. I've had 2 injuries on it. Like I love being on 2 wheels because I used to ride, I used to have motorcycles. And then was like, hey, that's a little too dangerous. I'll take it to off-road only. And then now I'm like, no 2 wheels. I got banned.
Well, that goes into a transition for me because I feel the same way. You're now 30 years old. Happy birthday.
Yeah, thanks.
And I do think that inevitably you start to see old men kind of reel it in. And they reel it in the spots that aren't as enthusiastic to young men. And you kind of, why? And then you find out why.
Yeah.
and you're finding out why. So tell me a little bit about your motorcycle history.
So I got my first motorcycle when I was 16, like 2 months after I got my driver's license. I went and did an ABATE course, it's like a weekend course. Mm-hmm. And then I did the advanced class like 2 weeks after that. I had a Gixxer. Gixxer?
600 or 750?
No, it was the 750.
Yeah.
I didn't know if it was 700 or 750, but I had a Gixxer 750 for my first bike. I only had that for like 2 months. And like I have pictures of it, but like I barely remember the bike. I just remember I felt like it was trying to kill me. And the guy who had it before me had like tuned it and done all this stuff to it, and it had like it was like I don't even know. It was like too much bike for me where I was at. Like I grew up riding dirt bikes, and I was like, I thought that I could handle that much power. So I downgraded to a 600, mm-hmm. and then I had that bike for like 3 years. And that was like my arguably favorite bike that I owned until I got a Ducati Hyper Motard. And so it was kind of the same thing. It was like, I loved my dirt bike. I was kind of over like the street stunt bike. Like I was like, I want something like that I can take and, do twisties with and like have fun and scrape knees. And I kept seeing the Hyper Motards, and my buddy had a Ducati dealership in Indiana. And so I went and checked one out in person. I drove it, and it was like a torque monster. Like you could pull wheelies in like every single gear. It wasn't fast on the top end, but on the low end, that bike was arguably one of the most fun bikes that I had. And I ended up selling the Gixxer, and then I had that Hyper Motard for like 2 years. And then I had a crash. So I was on back roads with like 10 or 15 guys, and we came into a turn that was way tighter than I thought it was. And I locked up my rear end and ended up going off into a ditch. And that wasn't like the thing that did it for me. It was like the combination of that, and then like a month later, this guy almost rear-ended me. He was like on his phone and didn't see me at night and was like 6 inches from my bumper. And then a girl like pulled out in front of me, and I got like my handlebars, like I got the death wobble and like almost crashed going like 70. And there was just like back to back to back things where I was like,
I know my hair's going like this on my arm right now.
yeah, I was like,
same way.
I don't know why. It was just, because at this point we're talking about like 6 years, right? So it wasn't like this was like a 1 year thing. This was like from the time I was 16 until I was like, early 20s. And I don't know, there was just a point where it got a little too squirrely for me. And I was like, I had a couple friends that got really hurt, and then I had a friend that died. And he went off the road, hit a tree, and I think that's kind of what did it for me. I was just like,
getting back into cars, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I
was like, hey,
that.
Cars, seatbelt, interior, there's the safety aspect. And so, on a dirt bike though, you're off road, and it's just kind of you and the machine. And like, so, when I moved to Colorado, I got super into trail riding, and that's kind of been my thing. And then
where do you go trail riding in Colorado?
Buena Vista. So my wife and I go to that like 4 mile area and just set up camp there for the weekend.
She rides too.
She has a quad. She has a Raptor. I wanted to get her on the 2 wheels, and now I'm glad she's on 4.
Yeah, no, I get it. As long as they come with, right?
Yeah.
Because that's the dream.
Yeah.
Is just to be able to do that, and like camping and all the other outdoor stuff that you want to get done, and be like, but I want a friend.
Yeah.
And I want my closest friend. So.
Yeah. And she loves it. She's an adrenaline junkie like me, so we have fun.
Any motorcycles right now?
No.
None,
I
done.
literally, I kid you not, my wife was behind me. I high-sided on my dirt bike, snapped my arm. We're like 6 miles off the road, and then we're 3 hours from the hospital. And that day it was like the biggest fiasco. But when I broke my arm, I actually thought I broke my leg first. I like went and grabbed my leg because like that's what was hurting. And I realized like my left hand wasn't working. And I like took my glove off, and it was just like completely sideways, and like the bone was like almost pushing out. And I literally kicked my bike and was like, I'm so done with you. Like, we were having a conversation. I'm like, I'm so done with you. You're trying to kill me. Like, what's wrong with you? Because this same bike had thrown me like 40 feet the year before in the same wash.
450?
It's a 300. It's a 300 XC.
KTM? Or
KTM.
Okay.
But the same thing happened. I was in a sand wash, and when I came, there was like in a sand wash, and
For
then
the
there's
record,
like
a 300 is a good bike. It's the best trail bike out there. But
yeah, it's that bike. So I love 2-strokes, and so I put a flywheel weight on it, just to like give it a little bit more. It made it more user friendly for trails, but I like 2-strokes.
Yeah.
So but that bike like twice now randomly, like I would be in a sand wash, and then like the front wheel just cocked and like sent me high sided like over the handlebars. So happened last year. I didn't get hurt, but I literally, my wife was behind me, like I flew like 30 feet, like I was flying, and then I was flying through the air. And this next time it did the exact same thing to me, and I've tried to replicate it. Like I've tried to figure out what in the world happened. I still to this day don't know. I have theories. But I was just riding in a straight line, and next thing I know, it cocks. Well, this time I'm going downhill a little bit, so when it flips me, like catapulted me into the ground. So I just like high-sided over it and just straight into the ground on my arm.
oh man.
And so I was like, this bike is like trying to kill me. I'm done with it. I literally was in a brace post-surgery, and I sold that bike to a guy on Facebook Marketplace in my brace. And he goes, did that happen on this bike? I was like, yeah. I was like, I'm done. I was like, this bike, be careful with it. But we're talking about it. He's like, I'm new to riding. I was like, this bike's a lot of bike, especially on trails. I was like, seriously, be careful.
Yeah.
But that was where like my search for the Sierra car really came into play, because I had been looking. I knew a couple people that own them. I'd been chatting with them about trying to buy one. And then this came up on Bring a Trailer. It didn't meet reserve. Followed the guy on Instagram, and then we were talking back and forth. And finally, ended up buying the car. And then I sent it to that. So the head engineer, kind of back to the original story, started his own shop whenever they kind of went and did their thing with EV. And he knows this car like better than anyone. So he did a bunch of like upgrades to the car. It was air shifted paddles. We switched it to an air shifted sequential, kind of back to the original setup.
Talk to me about the shifter.
So the shifter is super unique. So he actually does racing simulators on the side. He builds racing simulators. He sells them. And the shifter that's in here is actually from his racing simulator. So it's an electronic shifter, but it feels just like a sequential. So you have, you would never know.
Get the feedback and everything?
Yeah, feedback and everything. So like it feels like a real sequential. But it's just telling the computer to shift up or down.
On that same topic, do you have a simulator?
I don't, but I've driven one. I actually, when I was in Monterey, they had a booth set up at Quail, and my wrist was like only maybe like 2 months kind of post surgery, and I tried to like do the simulator, and it had so much torque, like I thought it was gonna break my wrist. So I didn't really get to like, I didn't really get to give it my all. But that was the only time I've ever actually played
Some
with
of those
one.
steering wheels, like when they're maxed out, they'll break your thumb. Like, have you haven't been over to Denver Racing Simulator?
No.
Okay, so Andrew has the sickest simulator. So it's 360 degrees, goes up and down. He has a few of them now. And I just remember driving in that thing and wanting the full feedback and going, maybe tune the feedback a little bit less. And I have one now too that a good buddy of mine, Brandon, built. And he even said like, hey, you don't have to run this thing all the way up. Like you'll get everything you need out of it at like 60% torque. But great way to train. So I'm surprised you don't have one. And I think that, well, you want to participate. I get it. Full on.
I don't know. You know, I had the Spec Miata like a year ago. And so like I wouldn't mind having a simulator. Like I think it'd be super fun. I just honestly don't know where I'd put it. I don't have room. I'm like tapped out on space. So I'm already starting to like plan the next build for a house because I'm like tapped out.
No kids though right now, right?
No kids right now.
Okay, yeah.
That's part of the problem is like when we built our house, like the main level only has one bedroom. It has a master wing and there's no like nursery room. Like all the bedrooms are downstairs. And so like now that we are starting to think about having kids, we're like, hey, we really didn't like think about the future when we were building this
I think the next
house.
stage is when you're 65 and you're like, everything needs to be on the main level.
Exactly,
like no basement space. It's funny you say that because I've got a fourth on the way and we have our like room downstairs and that's where my simulator was before. And I still want to have it there because a couple nights a week and then maybe not for 2 weeks, but then 3 nights that I'd come up sweaty 11:30 at night after the kids. And I've been 3 hours in the racing simulator. But there's this one wall I want to kind of put like a little ninja wall on and everything. I'm like, it's the only spot I can put the simulator. So I'm making that dad choice right now on whether I do training or whether I let them train. And they're going to win inevitably. So I understand the space aspect of that. Because they're big devices when you get a nice one.
I didn't realize how big they were. And it's funny you say the torque thing. Like I think this guy had it turn up to like 150 because I watched the kid before me. Like I was just like, to be frank, I was judging a little bit. I was like, dude, like this kid's
You're competitive,
getting
right?
whipped around like a rag doll. Like, you know, and I sat in this thing and it like almost tore my arms off. So I was like, I was very shocked at how much torque that steering wheel had.
No, they incredible technology and it only gets better and better. I'm excited to spend more time in a sim. All the best drivers are doing that stuff now. So I like to hear about that. Let's go back a little bit because I want to talk about the Miata comment too. But let's talk about what was Dylan's first car?
My very first car was a Ford Explorer. I had...
what year?
Oh, man, I don't know. It was like maybe a 2006.
What engine?
It was a V8 because I remember it was like one of the last years they made a V8 in that platform.
What color was it?
It was all black on like 22-inch black wheels with like a JL Audio like 18-inch like singular sub that like my stepdad at the time was an electrician and he like wired this thing in there and it just like shook the bones off that car. Like perfect 16-year-old kid car.
Yeah.
But I had spent years saving. In my mind I had found a build online. I'm like, I don't even remember what forum. And I was like, that's what I'm going to build. So I was like, black Ford Explorer, black wheels, all black interior. I'm going to put a sub in the back. I'm going to lower it. I'm going to do like, I had all the, blacked out headlights and taillights and the whole nine. I had like a vision for this car. And I spent like the better part of, I started building the car before I was even 16. Like I couldn't even drive it yet. It was like finished by the time. So it was like my project car from like freshman year until like the middle or end of sophomore year.
What did that car teach you?
Well, one, that I really like SUVs.
Okay.
Like I love sports cars, but like for every day, like I really like SUVs, and that car has always had a special place in my heart. And today I have 3 blacked out SUVs, so like it's carried with me, 15 years later. But I think more than anything, like building a car, like that was the first time I'd ever built, like had a vision for something, been able to like save up the money to do it, do it myself. I did all the work myself except for the electrical in the car. And like seeing that come to life was like super cool for me. So like now, you know, like all my cars, like I can't leave them stock. I always have some project, you know, whether it's cosmetic or, you know, performance, but like there's always my vision of like what I want to do or what I want to build. Like right now, like my childhood car, the first car that got me into cars was a Murcielago. And my dream car for forever has been a twin turbo Murcielago, but gated. And, you know,
That's a tall order, buddy.
it is a tall order. And the issue has been that they can't do, and they never have really been able to figure out the gated conversions. Like UGR did one. There's a couple people that have tried it, but like the ECU on those old, on the LP640 is like super clunky, and like no one has really figured out how. But now there's two shops, so EAG and then Three Pedal Garage, both are doing conversions.
I smell one in your future.
So I found a UGR twin turbo Murcielago in Florida that's already built. It's one of two that exist that like UGR built. It's an E-year, but it's an '08, and I'm going out there next week to drive the car, and then my plan is to get that and then get it manually converted.
Okay.
So
do you have anybody in mind to do the manual?
I don't know. I'm still like, I'm talking to people on both sides that currently have cars at both shops that are like getting it done. So they're kind of like guinea pigs. Yeah. I'm like, whoever figures it out first.
What color's the car?
It's black. I'm probably going to wrap it.
Okay.
Yeah. Cause like the Verde Ithaca and then, the Atlas, like the orange.
I won't ask you what color it's going to be wrapped because I know the shop that you use is probably going to want to debut that, and I'm going to give them that cake. But I'm excited to see that if it works out for you.
Yeah, I am too.
So, the Murcielago, your dream car.
Murcielago was like the dream car as a kid. Well, it's funny because there's two. I had a neighbor that had a green Viper, and I saw that car maybe like 8th grade, and ever since then I had wanted a green Viper. I was like, that was it for me. And the Murcielago was the first like, you know, because I grew up in like the boondocks in Indiana. Like there was no like nice cars. Southern Indiana, so like 45 minutes south. No, like not quite that far. I grew up in it's called Whiteland. It's like in between. I don't know if you're even familiar with Indiana.
I'm from Chicago.
No, okay. So you know where like Columbus is?
Yeah.
Okay, so like 20 minutes north of Columbus, basically. But cornfield country, town of like 4,000 people. You know, small, there's really no like car collections, there's no car meetups, there's no car shows. There was like a Dog and Suds they would do car shows at, and I would go to, but it was all like, it was obtainable cars. Like for me as a kid, like that was actually really cool for me to go to because it was like I could build all the cars that were there. You know, like in my mind, it was
old
like
hot rods.
Yeah, it was like old hot rods and like, you know, a lot of like there was like I don't want to call it a street racing scene, but this is like Fast and Furious area where like there was kind of a street racing scene, you know, and like
out cars.
Yeah, and it was like underbody and neon lights and shit, but you know, as a kid, like it was super cool to see that stuff, and like that was the kind of stuff like that. Those Dog and Sud shows are what got me into cars, like Fast and Furious, playing Need for Speed, going to like Dog and Suds.
For
like
people
those
who don't know what Dog
things.
and Suds is, can you describe a Dog and Suds?
Dog and Suds is like, imagine Sonic.
They've got great rip here.
Yeah, like imagine a Sonic, but from the 70s. Like with outdoor seating and a big parking lot, and they would just like host car shows there. That was like what no one even like ever really got, either get like drinks and whatever, but like Dog and Suds was the place you went to for the car shows. And so that was my childhood. Like every time that they threw those shows, like my parents would take me there, and they didn't care about cars. Like growing up, like no one in my family, my siblings didn't care about cars. Like I was the only person. So I was just in like La La Land walking around, usually on my own, like asking owners about the cars, like how fast have you gotten this thing to and whatever, you know?
Well, it's always the conversation, and I still joke about this. Is like, Dad, is that a fast car? You're like, he never explained to me whether it was quick or top end.
Yeah.
But yeah, you start learning about the mundane things of cars. And then if your parents aren't into it, like even I still joke around with my Uncle Les and my dad. They were all Chevy guys, and like, how did you end up a Ford guy? And I'm like, I don't know. Maybe I was the smarter one in the group. Maybe generational sin skips a year. I don't know. But yeah, Dog and Suds, car shows, man, that's fun. I like hearing about those stories.
That was like the peak, I don't want to call it the peak of my childhood, but that was what really got me into cars. But again, like I had never seen like a supercar before. And for the very first time, we were in Florida, and I saw a Murcielago. And I like almost lost. I was like, what? I had seen pictures, but like in person, I mean, that car commands a presence. It's like the size of a school bus. Like it is a big car. It is wide. It is
I
long.
was gonna say,
The doors are up.
the only way it's not big is height.
Yes, it is. It's short, but every other direction. I mean, that car is huge. And when you're, this is like 05, 06. So,
What
we're
color
talking,
was
it was
the
like
Murcielago you saw?
10. It was a orange, like it was Atlas. Like I think it's a Rankio. I think it's, I say, but Atlas, orange. So it's like a bright metallic, like vivid orange color. And so you imagine like, never seen a supercar, and then you see like a bright orange one with the doors, flipped up, and I remember the inside like had orange stitching and stuff, and the owner was like there, and he like let me like look at the car, and I didn't sit in it, but like I spent probably like 20 minutes looking at that car, and that was like where I was like, oh, like there's like cars, and then there's like there's another level to these.
Yeah.
And then, my neighbor, he owned a trucking company. He ended up buying like the screen Viper that I was talking about. And it would always be at like our high school football games. And I would see it like every week when we'd have our games. I guess every time we had a home game, like that car would be parked like right up front. And I would just, half the time I wouldn't even go in. I'd just sit out there talking with him about his car,
Was it a Gen 3 convertible? Green ones were always convertibles, I felt like.
It might have been. Yeah, like I'm trying to picture it. This is freshman year, so we're talking like a long time ago. But yeah, I think it was a Gen 3.
Okay.
Yeah. But that was when like Viper became my other car of like one day I'm going to own one of those. And so I actually ended up getting the Viper before the Murcielago, which is funny.
Do you have a Viper?
I do.
Talk to me about the Viper.
So I've got an ACR. It's a 2017. It was built by Calvo Motorsports. It makes 2,600 to the wheels. It is a rowdy beast. I've seen
many videos of you flaming all. you're resurfacing the asphalt in so many different ways.
Yeah, it's got that car is like otherworldly. Like it's hard to describe.
It is.
It is. And you've ridden.
I just got my first ride in Eric's, and it is another world, a world I didn't even know about. No one could have described to me without riding. And Bryce is giving me a heart. He's like, I just want the reaction of when you're in it. I was like, it's no big deal. I've been in fast cars. I got in the thing and I just started getting shivers.
Yeah.
Like, kind of like checking my surroundings, checking for things to grab. And you have a similar car. Oh my gosh. But we were talking earlier, like money can't buy happiness, and maybe, that's an expensive build. You will never understand how powerful your car is until you ride in your car.
Yeah.
Ever.
I call it a soul snatcher because I have videos, so this little mount right here, I'll put it towards, so like I'll have the camera facing the passenger, and I have like a ton of videos of that thing snatching people's souls. And you see it because what happens is like, first gear I'm making like 1,200, you click in second, making like 1,600, click in third, I'm making like 2,000. And then when fourth gear hits and I'm at like the top of fourth, like I'm making full power on the asphalt, and you can see when their soul leaves their body because it goes from like smile, because every gear you pull in,
it goes from excitement to
it like drastically accelerates faster. So it's like things start to melt away faster and faster, and it's hard to explain because it's not linear acceleration. Like it's like non-linear acceleration in the torque. Like I don't even know how to explain it. Like
I got one for it. It's faster.
Yeah, it's like every time you think you're going fast, it gets even faster.
And there's no car, well, at least maybe your new one, that you can be in that every gear change, you might get a little torque kick, but it's diminishing returns.
Yeah.
It is the opposite in your Viper. It is not diminishing returns. It's compounding returns.
Yeah.
Except all you want to do is spend that money. And
yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I got to ride in Eric's. I definitely want to ride in yours. But will you keep that car?
Yeah, I'll probably never sell it.
Because of the excitement that you have in it.
Yeah, I think the experience that car provides is unmatched. Like I had my McLaren, I had a 720S, I put 20,000 miles on that car. I drove it, it was like my daily, and I loved that car. But I had never experienced, and then I had a built like 2,000 horsepower Huracan from Sheepy. And, both of those cars were like pretty linear acceleration. Like you stomped on it and you went. The Viper was the first car. I rode passenger in Ryan's, so McRippin's black ACR that he had here. That was the first car. Like, I don't even mind riding passenger, actually. Like,
Really?
no, like, it doesn't bother
Because
me.
Eric thanked me for allowing me to be a passenger, and I said, "You're welcome," because I don't let a lot of people drive me. And I told him, "You didn't." It was weird because it's not like when someone scares you, like maybe Ryan started what could scare you or anything else.
Yeah.
The car was scary. The car is scary.
It's terrifying. And that was the thing, was like, I trusted Ryan, right? So like, that's like, yeah, I wouldn't
Got a
let
lot of
anybody
seat
drive
time
me,
in
but
that
like
car.
Ryan had more seat time behind that Viper than like anybody, right?
In the country, maybe.
And I arguably, like, yeah, I think
Yeah.
in the country, like, he had more seat time behind that car than anyone. So I'm like, if I'm going to ride passenger with anyone, it's going to be with him. So I didn't even mind that. I got in like super like calm, whatever. Same thing you said earlier, like you were looking for things to grab. Like, I felt my soul leave my body. Like, I remember like vividly being scared, and I've never been scared in a car before.
Well,
But it
okay.
wasn't like scared in a bad way. It was scared in like, I had like a smile on my face.
I describe it as like when you get scared in a car, it's more like, okay, I'll respect you. Like something happens, you're like, you get the 720 sideways.
Yeah.
I'm gripping a wooden steering wheel in the AC and I'm trying to hold on for dear life around tight turns with manual steering. And you're like, okay, all right. It's kind of like when my wife says something to me and I'm like, you're right. Okay, I was out of line. That's fine. This is not that. This feels like getting strapped to a table and watching the plungers to the left and the needle being put in your left arm. You're like, what is about to happen to me? And it keeps going.
Yeah. And I explained it as like watching the world melt around you, because that was the best way I could explain it. Was like every gear he pulled in, I felt like things were like melting faster and faster. And I had never experienced like a power band like that in a car. I bought my Viper the next day. So I literally, a guy in Michigan, Greg, who was a friend of Ryan's, I knew it was for sale. And I had been like kind of debating whether or not I wanted it. So I was like, hey, Ryan, like, I've never been in the Viper before. Like, do you care if we go out? And he was like, oh, no, for sure. Like, I'll take you out. And I remember messaging Greg after that. And I was like, hey, like, I'm going to buy your car. And then the next day I wired him the money. And like that car was to me like not even a week later. And then it was to Calvo. And Calvo had it for like 2 months, doing the build that it has now.
Yeah.
But
And you said it's been amazingly reliable.
It's been amazing. I've done like 10 plus events in that car, both half mile and quarter mile. I have done well over 500 hits in that car. I put 5,000 miles on the car, which, I know 5,000 miles doesn't seem like a lot, but if you ever get in that car, it gets like 3 miles a gallon. So like that tank lasts me about 50 miles. So I filled up that gas tank like 100 times.
And what fuel? Yeah.
I have a barrel of E98.
I know you called my office this past week.
I know.
And it said, is it okay for me to keep race fuel at the house? And I gave you some like suggestions on like having I'm like, yes, you'll be okay. You're not the only client that's called me and said, so I have barrels of racing fuel at my house.
Well, I have a barrel and a pump, and I honestly never thought about it because
Yeah.
Ryan had it too. And then I was talking with someone, and they're
Doesn't
like,
he have a detached garage though?
he does.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was talking with someone about it, and they're like, hey, like, you're not supposed to have that in your garage. You should check with your insurance. I was like, that's a good idea. Like, I should. So I sent an email, I think, but I was
It'll
just
be
like,
okay, but there are better ways to do things.
I know. I'm literally emptying it right now. I took the Viper out. I'm driving it to the office. I'm like emptying it out. I was like, all right, yeah, like now that I've thought about this. Because before, I would go all the way up to Cap, because like right near Cap is like the fuel station. So I could get it, or I'd get 5 gallon barrels of it. And like, it's pretty, like 5 gallons is like what it takes to get home. So by the time, like I would have like 3 barrels, like 2 in the passenger seat and like 1 in the trunk, and I was like, there's got to be a better way to do this. And I had originally
smoking a cigarette the whole way home.
I had originally used like the E80, I forget the name of the app, but like it's like Fuel Safe or something.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
like you can see what E85 or
And
what
people
pumps have
test it and
E85.
give you ratings.
And I had done that for like a year in that car, and then I got a batch of bad gas. And it really messed up the car. And so after that, I've never trusted pump E85 after that.
No,
so
it's funny because even knowing like we were at like Dynapro, and Bear owns Dynapro, and they would be talking like, hey, go to this gas station. Growing up like where I was starting to get into like the dyno scene and everything else.
Yeah.
They go, oh, go to this one. You're like, that one's halfway across town. Test the gas. It's different. It's not all the same.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, but now you just have your own little collection.
I know. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to go back to the old method because I don't have a detached garage, but it's all right.
You maybe keep it here at the fuel shed too. There's
Yeah.
always that option. I plan on building something with having pumps here, specifically for just like 91 or race fuel or diesel for all the equipment and everything. But Yeah, eventually you start let's change topics. You originally lived downtown when you moved here.
Yep.
How many car garage did you have?
I had a 1-car garage.
How'd that work out for you?
So Black Mountain Garage was like
John was a lifesaver.
Yeah, John was a lifesaver. Like that was my second home. Because when I first moved to Colorado, we just had 2 cars. I had an old G-Wagon. It was like a 2017. It was a G63. And then my wife had her Audi, and I don't remember what that was. And which was fine. Like I kept the G-Wagon in the car or in the garage. It barely fit. Like that thing was a beast. And then she street parked. Then I got the McLaren. Then I got the Sheepy Huracan. Then I got the Viper. And then we got rid of the old G-Wagon. I got a 4Runner. And then my wife got a new G-Wagon. And so like before I knew it, we had like 6 cars in a 1-car garage. So like everything else was at Black Mountain Garage and while we were building the new place. And it's funny because I had like 4 years to plan for the new place. And now I'm like tapped out for space in the new space too. Yep. And I'm like, what I found is, and you see it here, you can never have too big of a garage. You will always find a way to fill it.
Yes.
So this is very much my dream. And the next build is like detached, massive garage that, hopefully you can spend years filling.
I think that is the idea. I mean, when I built this, it was, and I could tell that story and we'll save that for another day, but it was the opportunity that, like, how do you build as big as you can possibly build? Yeah. And then the other thing is how fast is that going to fill up? Especially like I love junk. I love projects. And so that's really easy to do late at night, a few drinks in, like looking at Facebook Marketplace, like, oh, I've always wanted a low mile XJ. I had one of those in high school. And you're like, oh, this one's like super sweet and I'm going to buy this. You end up running out of space. I hope to facilitate some friendship storages, some, very cut rate. Hey, I just need a spot for the winter kind of thing. Yeah. Not to take any business from the storage places in the area because they're doing an awesome job as well. Yeah. But yeah, you run out of space and that is funny. I'll tell you a story. I lived downtown when I first moved here. Same thing. I didn't know where I was going to live, so I had a place down in Confluence Park. Probably my nicest place I've ever lived, like in the view and everything else like that. But there was only one parking spot. Same situation. So then I managed to get another parking spot, and then I managed to get another. And this was already like, these were owned, not rented. This was hard to get. So at the time I was paying maybe $140 a month for the spot on the very end, but I got the end spot and I had my Mustang over there. And I was like, man, I'm running out of space and I love this car, but I would go down there, take the cover off of it, start it up, and I would drink a glass of gin just sitting in the driver's seat. Like my neighbors thought I was like some weird, like, is this guy gonna drive away? Nope. I would just go down there in the winter nights, start it up, let it get warmed up, and I would sit in the corner. And I'm like, I need a bigger garage. And then it just went boom, 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 boom. And then we end up here. So I understand the feeling, but now you have a better facility for this, your house that you've already outgrown. Yeah. And it's down south now. You've moved out of the suburbs or out into the suburbs, but without kids. So what made you move out of the city?
Like I moved to Colorado because I snowboard. So like I had a buddy that moved here in 2014 and I came out and I had always like East Coast snowboarded. I'd never been to the West Coast. I came out here for a week and I fell in love. And I was like, one day I'm going to move to Colorado too. So when I moved out here, like the only reason I moved downtown was because my business, like we were looking for an office. I wanted somewhere. I knew most of the office space we were going to look at and where we were going to attract talent. It was better to be central because I didn't want to put us in a weird neighborhood because I didn't know what neighborhood to be in. So I was like, I'm just going to go central, find an office that's central, find a place that's nearby, and then figure it all out from there. And, it's great from an office perspective. Our office is still downtown, so I commute. But from a living perspective, like battling traffic every day, especially when you drive cars, is not fun. I live right off of Wadsworth. I have a 6-mile drag strip right outside of my neighborhood.
You do. You have a great road.
It's incredible.
Yeah, I may have brought that way past the RPM range, racing somebody like down towards, not racing. We were going to the golf course and I was just giving it the beans. Yeah. So yeah, you live in a great spot for a wide open road to get everything going. Yeah. I have to ask you this. You're not running a front plate on all your cars. Yep. And you have parked on the street at some point downtown. How many front license plate tickets have you gotten? Because I've gotten a ton.
Yeah. So first of all, if anyone doesn't know, Colorado, well, first of all, doesn't enforce any laws from a
automotive yeah, correct. I would
perspective.
agree with that.
But for front plates, it's all the meter folks. Like, they're the ones that enforce it, not the police. So if you park downtown and you don't have a front plate, you better believe.
Made in Colorado, just turn this video off.
Yeah.
Like I'm
not going to shit talk because you know what? At this point, I'm like, it's like, I pay my dues. That's how I'm like,
I get it.
This is the price that I pay to not run a front plate. And honestly, since I've lived in Colorado, I've got 2 in the McLaren I remember vividly because one of them I watched. I was getting a haircut. I was downtown right near 16th Street Mall, and I watched this guy just ride it, and he had like a grin on his face while he was doing it.
You could put it in the front dash. Like, I always keep it under the floor mat, throw it in the front dash. They do not care.
So that's the funny thing. Like, my wife had in her G-Wagon, doesn't run a front plate, puts it up in her dash. She was getting tickets pretty consistently, like once every like 2-3 months. And I was like, dude, like, you've got to put this like up in your dash, because where she parks downtown, like, she's, you know, like I am parked in I have my own spot. There's no one that's back there, right? But she street parks. And so I'm like, you're street parking multiple times a week. Like, that's why you're getting so many tickets. So I was like, just put it up in your windshield. Maybe that'll work. She hasn't gotten a ticket since. It's honestly worked for her.
Oh, it
does
not work for
me and my SUV, I got a ticket recently. I had it up in the front and I still got a ticket. So
yeah, that's one, like, I'm garage parking everything at this point when I go down there. But that's enough naysaying. You hit a like a nerve on that one, because I lived down there and had no front plate, or I don't know where to put the bracket on that car or anything else.
Well, it's the thing. It's like the cost of the front bumper pays for, like, you know, 50 tickets. You know, like I would much rather
screw holes or
like,
any mounting bracket. Yeah. No, I get it. Well, let's talk a little bit too. So we've gone from the Exploder or the Explorer, right?
Yep.
And then you moved on after that. You were talking about the Green Viper, how that was kind of your trigger point, which I always like to ask that question. So thanks for going into that. Have you maybe owned a bad car?
I've owned a lot of cars. And I will say the point from which I had my Ford Explorer until I got my first supercar, I probably had like 25 cars. So I had a Chrysler 300. I had 3 Volkswagen TDIs. I had a Volkswagen GTI. I had 3 Honda Civics. I had an SI, and then just 2 regular Honda Civics. I don't remember, like a 2003. I had two Toyota Corollas. One of them I blew up. And for a lot of this time period, like, I was starting BrüMate, so like a lot of these were just beater cars. Like the TDIs, I would pick one up on like Craigslist for like $1,500, and I'd get 60 miles a gallon, and diesel was like $2.
Yep.
And like, I would just drive it until it died, and then I would buy another one.
I feel like there is a lot of, I like when I hear about the practical stories. I've owned 3 Priuses at this point. People are like, wait, what? Huh? Like, yours was a Golf, right?
Yeah.
Yours are Volkswagens, or they were Golfs or Jettas, or
so the Golf TDI.
Yeah.
Yep.
And they're throwaway cars, but they're not throwaway cars, because you're like, I really kind of like how reliable and how helpful this is to my life.
They were all manuals.
Yeah.
Every single one of them.
That's
My
fun.
Corolla was a manual. The Honda Civics were manuals. The TDIs were manuals. They were all manuals, so they were still fun.
Yes.
My GTI was a manual. Like, every car that I owned after, so my Honda Civic was the first manual. It was a Honda Civic SI. It was a 2007. I didn't know how to drive a manual. I went up to Fisher's, which is about an hour from my house. I bought it, and I learned how to drive a manual watching YouTube videos on the way home. Like, that was how I learned how to drive a manual.
The second person on this channel to say that. I also taught myself. And talk to me about that experience.
Oh, it was a nightmare. Like, I remember one stoplight, like, I went through like 2, like, I kept stalling, and people were behind me, like, piling up and honking, and I was so stressed out, and I was like, there was nothing I can do because I had no one with me, so I just have to figure it out.
Yeah.
And I could not figure out the feathering of like letting off the clutch and giving it the right amount of gas, and so I just kept stalling it. And then I was getting flustered, which, you know, adds like fuel to the fire, so you're even more like on edge and trying to figure it out. But by the time I got home, like, I knew how to drive a manual.
Yeah, I think the barrier of entry on a manual is not as big as people think. It's kind of like skiing. The skiing to snowboarding, to go to kind of your point.
Yeah.
Skiing is like easy barrier of entry, hard to master. Snowboarding is like the middle ground, because it's a lot harder to get your feet under you. Manual, I feel like the same way. You can get it, and then you're functional.
Yeah.
To get good at it is a lot more work, and I think it's taken a lot more time for you to become. I mean, buddy, I was watching you drive this thing tonight, and this is our first time meeting tonight, so that's fun for me. You were getting on it, and I know your history, so that's where I want to transition into. you bought a Miata. And I actually love Miatas because I think they're little go-karts. I think they teach you how to drive. And you bought one to essentially teach yourself how to drive.
Yeah. When I had the McLaren, I went to High Plains, and I just felt like I couldn't really get on the car. Like I didn't want to wreck it. I didn't have track insurance. I was pretty timid with the car. And I remember leaving there, but just being like, I would really like to learn how to like actually drive.
Yeah.
You know, like I drag race the Viper. That's totally different. But like
It's different.
I wanted to learn. And so I started talking with some friends, and they were like, dude, just get like a Spec Miata. It's you can find like a pretty decent one for under 20 grand, and like just spend like a year like learning how to drive, and then you can upgrade from there. And so that was what I did. I bought one last year. And I remember when that car got unloaded, I was super excited. I went and drove it. I called the guy that sold it to me, and I was like, hey, I think something's wrong with this car. And he was like, what do you mean? And I was like,
It's called NA.
I'm like giving it gas, and it's like not going. Like I feel like it's not throwing a check engine light, but I feel like something's wrong. And I knew kind of in the back of my head, because I was like, sure, but this car had like no lights, and it was a race car. Like there was no speedometer. Like the speedometer didn't even work. So I'm like, even if there was a check engine light, like I don't even know if it would work.
It's got to be 200 horsepower.
Like less than that, maybe.
Yeah, maybe
I don't
180.
know. Like
I don't even know.
For the Spec Miatas, I think it's less than 200, and it definitely felt like
you
it.
say that I had my car from Illinois when I moved out here. It was a Mustang GT, and I had it moved out here, and I drove it home, and I said the same thing. I called the shipping company, and I was like, "Did you guys do something to my car?" And it's an embarrassing moment. Maybe
it was embarrassing for me too.
It was embarrassing for me. I was like, "Did you guys do something?" Like, no, nothing. Like, we did everything. Like, we shipped it. No one drove your car. Everything else. And then someone told me, and it seems like an obvious statement, you're at elevation. And then I did the math. It's like, oh, it's 3% less oxygen every 1,000 feet. So it's like, oh, my car's like down 27%.
Yeah.
And it is a reality. And then that's when boost comes in.
Yeah. So it wasn't even so much that. It was just like sub 200 horsepower manual in a car that's completely gutted, mind you, too. And I remember, like, I called him. I'm like, hey, like, there's no way for me to see if there's a check engine light on this thing, because like the dash is like nothing's working. And he was like, yeah, because he had a computer in the car, so he's like, the speedometer works off here and blah blah blah. And I'm like, well, I think something's wrong with it. And he's like, why? And I'm like, well, I'm getting on it, and it's super hesitant, like it really just, it's not moving. And he's like, it's a momentum car. And he's like, once you get going, you carry that momentum, but it's going to take you a minute to get going. And that was like what kind of, I was like, okay, like I get it. And so like I got to learn like what it's like to drive a slow car fast. Mm-hmm. And, I think that was a great foundation to learn how to drive like a fast car fast, even faster.
Yeah, no, I do get it, because I'll even get in a really fast car compared to, like, I beat the crap out of the Corvette, and it's 380 horsepower. And you do have to take time to appreciate the lines. And I think that there are some frustration points, because I'll get in somebody else's car and I'll drive it faster. And I'm not an expert driver. It's just I drive slower cars than they own.
Yeah.
And so when I get in one of those, I'm like, oh, this is amazing. But also, I want to keep my humble roots. I think the Miata is an amazing car. But you said you're done with it.
Yeah, I mean,
you graduated.
I don't even want to say, like, that car was really fun, and it was fun to learn in. But I think, as you saw today, like, I'm an adrenaline junkie. I need that, like, adrenaline hit. And, like, the Miata just didn't really provide that. So, we talked earlier about, like, the twin-turbo Murcielago. Like, I have the Viper. Like, I don't really ever keep anything stock. And, like, it has to have a thrill factor. And, like, I think a Miata is a really fun car, but it didn't quite have, like, that thrill factor. And arguably, like, this car is, like, similar in price to, like, a full, a nice spec Miata, but it provides a thrill factor. So it's not about money. Like, it's just a huge difference. This is the same power as a Miata, and it weighs 900 pounds.
Mm-hmm. That's still awesome.
Yeah.
So speaking of power to weight ratios, and will evolve in your car, evolution, you've got at least one car on order right now?
I do, yeah. Just one car on order. All right. I've had the Koenigsegg on order since early 2021.
So let's talk a little bit about that. Make some Porsche people feel a little bit better on the timeline of ordering a Koenigsegg.
So for perspective, I actually got my I got my allocation late. So there are people that have actually been waiting even longer than me. But I've been waiting. By the time it delivers, it'll be about 5 years.
Okay.
So end of next summer is delivery timeline. But a lot of that has to do with the homologation. So like in order to pass US standards for street legal emissions, like they have to jump through a ton of hoops and it takes a really long time. So Koenigsegg started delivering the Jesko to Dubai and Europe and a handful of other countries last year. And none of the US cars have started delivering. There's one car at Quail that was unveiled that is the first US spec to touch, down and stay here, but it still actually isn't homologated. They're still waiting on final approval. So right now it's on like dealer plates. So they should have homologation done by end of year. They're already building my car. So the hope is, for me, it was like by the time,
What
they're
color did you
finished,
get?
it is Viola Hong Kong purple. So Ferrari color.
Okay.
The original concept for that car was purple carbon. But purple carbon became a stock option. So like when you're speccing the car, you could get purple carbon. So there's like 3 or 4 cars that are purple carbon out of the like 125 that they're making. So I switched from purple carbon and ended up doing Viola Hong Kong because it'll be a 1 of 1.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you know, are you familiar with the specs on this car?
Yeah.
What are they?
So 1600 horsepower to the crank on E85. I was just in Monterey for Car Week, and at Quail, their main driver broke the Laguna Seca record in their production car, the Imperial Blue that they have, and he had never driven that track before. He had actually only driven it in a simulator, which is like kind of back to the simulator like conversation.
Yeah.
But he's like, I've never driven this track before. I got the ride passenger with him, which was insane in that car. Like I got the ride passenger with their test driver.
Humbling, right?
Like, oh, so humbling. But like that car is just bonkers, and it didn't even have it had pump gas in it. They hadn't even put the E85 in yet. And I got to do a car rally with them, so I got to drive the car for like 3 hours, which was super cool. And that thing is quick. Like, the Viper, like it's so fast, but it's also slow at the same time. Like the boost, like
because of the torque, it feels heavy.
it's like heavy,
it's not
and
a
it's
heavy
like
car,
it
but
takes
it
a second to
feels-
get going, and like,
Yeah.
but the Jesko is snappy. Like this second that it's like instant
Like
throttle
a
response.
Honda Civic Si.
Yeah, exactly.
But
But like a McLaren, like it's like
Yeah,
instant, like
it's quick.
snappy,
Yeah,
smaller
yeah.
turbos, like snappy, and I think they use 66 millimeter turbos in the car. So smaller turbos. I run 86s in the Viper, so much smaller turbos. They spool up really quick though, so it is snappy, like instant throttle response. And there's roughly 40 of them that'll be coming to the U.S. So I should be on the lower end from a number perspective.
July?
July. So I'll be one of the first like 10 cars that'll be delivered here.
I would love to see that back here. If anything, just to do a video and a quick interview for it.
Yeah, the idea is we're gonna do an unveiling because it's funny. Like I got the allocation through Wysock up in Canada,
Okay.
and then they turned in Grand Touring bought them, so it's through Grand Touring in Canada. So it's gonna like ship in from Canada to Mike Ward, and then they're gonna do like the unveiling at Mike Ward,
Nice.
and then from there I plan on having that like that car for me is gonna be an everyday car. Like it's not going to sit in the garage.
Good.
I have one designated garage for it that I'm building out right now, and I'm going to drive that car and give it. It is a driver's car too. Like sitting passenger in it and being able to drive it. Like that car was meant to be driven. Like both
I'm
on and off
happy
the
to hear
track.
that. I think that the best thing that the car community can do, especially when there's some financial backing behind it, is share it.
Yeah.
And drive it and have little kids point out the windows going, look at that. My favorite is when you see, my favorite is still when like little old ladies go, oh my gosh, that's such a beautiful car. What is that? I want to talk to her more than I want to talk to anybody that's going to be like, how much does that cost? Like,
I
and everything
know.
else.
You know what's funny though? Do you get this in the Viper a lot? Because I like it in the McLaren, in the Lamborghini, whatever. Like old ladies could care less. Like they don't give a shit. But when I have my Viper out, they're videotaping almost wrecking their car, and it's like that car commands presence from like everyone. Like little kids love it, like old dudes love it.
Mm-hmm.
It's like American muscle, like through and through. I mean, honestly, everyone loves it, but it's like there's no like blind spot of like, group where they're like, like I don't really care for that car. It's like it appeals to everyone.
I
Versus like the McLaren, I feel like there was definitely people that was like, I don't know, what is that, a spaceship?
Yeah, well, there's a uniqueness to it. I mean, I don't think you see that many Vipers. My
Yeah,
claim to fame with little old ladies is the AC Cobra
yeah,
because I used to put a car seat in it, and I used to drive the babies around in it. And then I've even gone to pick up my kids from school and make both of them sit in the front seat with just a lap belt. That's always questionable, but I don't care. I've been right next to. I mean, we insure a bunch of police officers, and I've got buddies with them, but most of them just give me a thumbs up when I have 2 kids, no airbag. Like, clearly, this is an attentive process. I'm not on my phone. I'm not
yeah,
running them to the next soccer practice. The older cars, personally, that's why I collect the certain things, is because there's some kind of nostalgic presence behind that car.
yeah,
But you're right. I don't think you're going to get that with a Lamborghini for art. You do get attention from that kind of stuff. Don't get me wrong. There's guys that have sold their cars to get Porsches of all things because they don't want the attention that they get.
yeah,
But you're right. A Gen 5 purple, large-winged, hissing monster is going to have anybody look at it, Dylan. So
yeah,
I probably get that in the AC the most for that reason.
yeah.
But let's go ahead and I want to touch base on, you've built this up over the years. You have worked and you have built your car collection up. It started with an Explorer. It started with a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, design. Imagination in the teenage years is really kind of neat because that tends to die off with maybe video games or real life, working and everything. But you developed a company that has helped stimulate your love for cars, and it's BrüMate.
Yep.
And I want to know, just we've got a little bit of time left. I want to know how that developed from nothing to something that's, I mean, I can't go into a store now, and I get proud knowing you because I'm seeing like Stanleys and Yetis being replaced on the shelves with your product, and I want to know how that came to be.
Yeah, I mean, a couple things. So I'm even humbled by it myself. Like when I go into a Murdoch's or wherever and like I see our product on shelf, like it's a little bit of a pinch me moment. Like I was at the doctor yesterday and went into the, or no, wait, what's today? Friday. Went into the office and the girl that was checking me in had a BrüMate. She had like a BrüMate Era. And I just said, hey, I like your BrüMate. She was like, thanks. And she started telling me all about it. And that was it. I was extended. I didn't tell her that I own BrüMate. Nothing. She still doesn't know. But she asked for my email, and I said like Dylan@BrüMate.com. She still didn't even she didn't even make the connection. We still like totally left it. I'm like,
no way.
Swear.
Like
she didn't make.
I
spelled it out.
Hits her in the
didn't
face.
make it. But it's so cool to like when I go in the airport or wherever, like see it. Like that's a pinch me moment, and it's something that like when I started BrüMate, it's funny because my original idea of entrepreneurship was like I wanted to be a serial entrepreneur, so I wanted to build companies and sell them. So I started my first company in high school. I ran that through freshman year of college. I sold the company, and naturally, like I went and started another company. I was like, I'm going to build that up, and I'm going to sell it too, and I'm going to build up another one, and keep doing this forever because I have the attention span of a squirrel, and these to me are like 3 to 4 year runway things where like I find a niche, build the solution, and then sell it to someone that sees the value in it, right? Mm-hmm. And when I started my second company, BrüMate was actually like a side project. Like I had Vici Design, which was my second company. I had a warehouse for it. And BrüMate started off as a little corner of that warehouse of like a side project that I was working on. And within a year became the main project. And it just started with the idea of, because before all my companies were like B2B. So I worked with other businesses providing solutions. So my first company was cell phone parts that I provided to cell phone repair shops. And my second company was commercial tile that I sold to like installers and resellers like Wayfair. And I very much wanted to be on the consumer side. Like I wanted to create like a lifestyle brand where you could like walk around and like see people like using that product, mm-hmm. right? And so since the time I was a kid, like that's what I wanted to do. So when I went to school, I went for engineering, but my plan was to go to design school. So I wanted to have like a mechanical engineering background, go to design school and become an inventor. Like that was my pipe dream, right? And so I ended up leaving school. I didn't pursue that. And I
dropped out.
Yeah, I dropped out, and
Can't say the word.
I had my other company at the time, so I was making enough money to sustain that lifestyle. Like it was fine. It wasn't scary for me to leave, but what was scary was like I was on like this side of entrepreneurship and I wanted to be over here and I didn't know how I'd get there without a design background. Like how would I ever become an inventor, create something if I don't have that background? And so I kept a journal and like I would just journal different ideas for products and whatever, like if I had an idea, and most of it was just like garbage, right? Like most of it didn't ever come to life. But like if I found a good idea, I'd look it up. Like, has anyone done this before? Like, what does the competition look like? How big is the like market? I'd go on Amazon and look at sales rankings. Like, how much volume do I think this is doing? And BrüMate was the first idea I ever had that was one, super simple, and two, where there was literally nothing. Like, and the idea was what you have right here, the Hop Slater Trio. This is our very first product that we ever created. And the idea started as I drink 16-ounce beers. The last quarter of my beer is always warm, and I want to create something to keep it cold. So I want to create an insulated beer koozie, which vacuum insulated drinkware existed. What I didn't know was, had anyone ever made a 16-ounce beer koozie with that technology? And what I found was they didn't. And it was like, and when I say they didn't, I mean like never in history had anyone ever made that, right? So like talk about like wide open playing field. And so the more I dove into the drinkware market, the more I realized like alcohol was pretty much untouched. Like Yeti, Hydro Flask, all these brands were doing hydration. They were doing hydration in coffee mugs. So you had like Contigo on the coffee mug side, you had Yeti with like 3 or 4 tumblers, and like no one was really focused on alcohol. And so the idea for BrüMate was really built on innovation. So innovating, taking that technology, bringing it to a new category that it really hadn't been applied to. And that was kind of the success of the brand. It was focusing on alcohol. It was online only at the time, which, most of the brands, well, all the brands that existed were all retail. So I was really the only one speaking to like that online savvy consumer, which tended to be a younger consumer than the one that was currently consuming all the other brands.
Social media and clicks and
yeah. And so it was kind of like right time, like, and entrepreneurship is a lot of that. Like it's a combination of having that right idea, but it's also, is it the right time to pursue that idea, right? And then on the flip side of that, it's like, is there enough fuel in your tank to really see it through? And BrüMate for me was like, because I had so many different ideas where like I was like, oh, this is going to be big, and then like it just fizzled off and became nothing, right?
Yeah, you hit it on the head right there with, I'm going to take it this many steps, but am I really going to run it to the finish line?
Yeah.
And you have to, and you're obviously seeing that that's blowing up for you right now.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing is like BrüMate was the first company that I ever had where the idea of becoming a serial entrepreneur completely went away from me, and all I've been laser focused on for almost a decade now is BrüMate, because I've been able to funnel like all of my creative energy into creating new categories, new products, new, channels. We were online. How do we go into wholesale? How do we take over and dominate wholesale? Like every day there's a new challenge. And like that challenge for me is what keeps me going. And like, that's what fuels my fire. So like BrüMate has become like, now to me, it's like a legacy brand. Like I want to run this thing forever. And like, I want this to be a household name, in 50 years when I have kids and grandkids where they're like, hey, like my granddad, created BrüMate, like, and maybe they're part of the company in some way or whatever, like, but I don't imagine that I will ever do anything different. Like this for me, I think is like,
it sounds like you're doing some collaborations with some of our mutual friends as well, which I'm excited to hear because there's a lot of fun products that can come out, especially from people your age, my age. You got the wheels turning when you started going there. We got a little bit away from cars, but I start going like, oh yeah, I like what you're saying right now. I could start getting on the edge of my seat. I like how that's been able to allow you to continue your love for cars, buy some new ones. Is there a car that you maybe want past the Koenigsegg?
Well, I think 2 things. One, the build to where I got, I think is really important because I actually downgraded for like 6 years in my cars. Like we talked earlier about those beater cars. Like my most expensive cars were like my first like 5 cars. And then once I like started my first business, like I put all my money into that. So I just drove cars into the ground. I would buy like $1,000 or $1,500 car that had good gas mileage. Like I had a Mazda 3 at one point that I got for like $400. My GTI I bought for $250 because the guy thought that the engine was blown, but it was just the turbos. And I swapped them out, upgraded the turbos, and that car became like one of my favorite cars I had for like a year. But all my cars were like under 2K for like a solid 6 years. And when I moved to Colorado, like I had just bought my Mercedes like 6 months before that. And before that, when I met my wife, I had a 2003 Honda Civic. So like that was a car I bought for $1,500.
Were those like a weak moment of gluttony, or was that a reward?
It was a reward. It was, so I didn't take a salary from BrüMate for the first 2 years. And after those 2 years, when I started taking a salary, was when I like went out and was like, hey, like now I'm not taking money from the company per se. Yeah. Like I have my own salary and I can use that. Like, and I didn't buy those cars outright. Like I had a car loan, like, but it was like, and you know, it was a 2016, 17, I paid like 70 grand for it, which is expensive. But it was like, you know, it was like a $1,400 car payment. And it was like, hey, like I'm not taking money from BrüMate. Like this is my money now. And like I'm gonna reward myself because after 6 years of driving like $1,500 cars,
when you did
like,
that though, there was a decision to be made. You didn't just go out there. You contemplated it. You're like, at some point, and forgive me if I'm speaking out of turn, but at some point you asked yourself, do I deserve this?
Yeah, 100%. Because it was more, and it wasn't even like so much deserve. It was like, it's like selfish, right? Like, yeah. Am I hindering the success of my company because I'm taking money out of my company? And so like I spent like, so when I first started BrüMate, I lived in a house. It was a house that I had bought. It was like an old farmhouse. I bought it for $65K at auction, sight unseen. I spent over 100 grand remodeling from the money from my prior company that I had sold, remodeling that house. I did all the work myself. I then got a home equity line and I was using that to fund BrüMate. The issue is that my HELOC was only for 60% of the total value of the house. So I had a bunch of money that was like pent up in the house that I couldn't use. So I ended up moving. I sold that house, moved into a 750 square foot apartment with one of my best buds. Our rent combined, like I paid like $600 a month for rent. I drove a $1,500 car. And for 3 years, I grinded in that apartment. And I built, you know, the foundation of BrüMate. And then that was a reward where I was like, hey, like, BrüMate's big enough, like it can sustain to like pay you a salary, and like now you deserve, you know, to have something nice.
These are the stories.
And I still lived in an apartment when I got the G-Wagon.
These are the stories that 16 to 21-year-olds need to hear, and probably the 21 to 30-year-olds. But to know that you go, okay, I'm doing this to make that exponential. I don't think people don't talk about it enough. I don't see it enough. Because now you can say, oh, well, he's got a new Koenigsegg. He's been waiting 5 years. That's not at all what that's about.
Yeah.
It's about the fact that you dove to the ground to get momentum and dove into that hard, grinded, and come up on the top.
Yeah. And I think that it's like people need to understand that I've never met a single successful person unless they like scammed people where like they didn't go through that period. Like there is going to be like, if you're starting a business, like one, it's really hard and you know this, like it's extremely difficult. And you have to be self-accountable. So you got to wake up every day, hold yourself accountable. And if that fire fizzles out, well, guess what? It just goes away. No one's holding you accountable. And on the flip side, like you're funding that, you have all the risk. And so if you like take other risky decisions, like if I would have like, while I'm starting BrüMate, like go out and buy like a, you know, McLaren with the money, like I would have been like actually like putting myself at risk. Like I'm literally competing with myself, you know, like, and it's a weird thing to think about, but it's like,
right.
I'm taking money from myself over here to give myself money over here. But by doing that, I'm actually putting myself at a disadvantage. And so that was what I had to remind myself is like, hey, like you're doing this because one day it's going to pay off. And when I moved to Colorado, like the McLaren was that was my first supercar. And that was 5 years after starting BrüMate, like 5 years after starting, did I like get my first supercar. And then since then, you know, obviously I've been able to build my collection, but like they didn't happen overnight. You know, BrüMate's almost 10 years old at this point.
You just said something that hit real home. You said, and it was at the point where like you would say you'd fizzle out. If you fizzle out, I'm going to say it, you don't deserve it.
Yeah.
And that's the hard thing to swallow. And that's always the most difficult part.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I mean, the problem with entrepreneurship is it's just generally you. Like maybe you have a co-founder or whatever, but like you are either your biggest ally or your biggest enemy. Because like if you root for yourself and like get up and like do the work, like you're probably going to make it. And like it may not look like what it looked like 10 years. Like BrüMate looks nothing like what it looked like 10 years ago, you know? So like people always ask about like the failures, like it's like micro failures along the way, right? But like if you have the big failure, it's usually just because you ignored warning signs or like you just like fucked up. Because most people don't have catastrophic failure unless they just because it's you. Like, you know all the inner workings of your company. How do you have a catastrophic failure unless you brought people in that you like trusted too much, which is really common.
Internal locus of control.
Yeah.
Everything's my fault. The credit and the failures.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think with entrepreneurship, like, it's really important that, you know, people understand that, and like, you've got to be able to be self-accountable. And if you can be, then, you know, you've probably got what it takes.
All right. I want to sit here and talk for 2 more hours with you, but we'll wrap it up. But before we wrap it up, is there anything else that you want to talk about tonight? Because this is your interview, not mine.
You know, I just think from a car perspective, like, it's like the building of a car is like, I don't want to compare it to the building of a company, but like, it has that same element of like, you have a vision for your car. You like put in the sweat, blood, you know, the blood, sweat, and tears to be able to afford to like bring that build to life. You have that vision, you like see it through, and then when it comes to fruition, it's like your brainchild. Like, you're like, I had this vision, I brought it to life. And I think entrepreneurship is really similar to that. Like, for all of you that like have your project cars and whatever else, like, how many people do you know that have like 10 project cars that they've never finished, right? And that's kind of like the 10 different business ideas that you never really ran with. And then you've got like your trophy, you know, that you saw all the way through, and that's your favorite car. Well, because you saw all the way through, like, you brought that vision to life. And like, entrepreneurship is the same way. And like, I see a huge similarity between the two. And, you know, I think the blend for me of, you know, being able to run BrüMate, being able to also like satiate that passion for cars, like, those two things go hand in hand for me. And, you know, even as a kid, like, I never wanted to be rich. I just wanted to be able to afford to do the things that I like. And the things that I like were cars. Like, that was my thing. It was never about like having a big house or, you know, being on whatever, you know, list or whatever. It was just like, I just want to be able to afford my hobbies. Like, that was my pipe
At any
dream.
level.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, let me be the first or the last to congratulate you. You've arrived at doing that. That's the piece that you get from that, right?
Yeah.
And that's what's fun.
There's levels to it though. Like, you know, in the very beginning, it was like my Honda Civic was my prize, you know, and then when I got that G-Wagon, like, that was my prize, and then when I got the McLaren, that was my prize, and the Koenigsegg. And so there is like, there's levels to it. And I think, you know, for anyone watching, like, there's no price on happiness when it comes to cars. Like, it's whatever you're into, whatever makes you happy, whatever project you want to pursue. Like, it's just the thought of like, I had a vision, I brought it to life, and this is my thing. Like, that's what makes people happy. So it doesn't matter if it's a $10,000 car or a $500,000 car. Like, I think cars bring the same level of joy at any, like, yes, there are different prices of cars, but like, arguably, like, anyone who is in the car community, like, I think we all get the same level of happiness out of our cars. And like, that doesn't really change with different price points. So like, enjoy what you have, and, you know, and enjoy what other people have. Like, there are so many people that have insane car collections that I just like, you know, when I see them, I'm like, that one day I hope that maybe I can have that, you know? And so there's
or
like
there's just some curiosity. I'm like, that person took that path.
yeah.
That's their dream.
Yeah.
And that's so much fun to see and appreciate and learn about.
Yeah.
And that's what we got to do with you tonight, man. Thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah.
This has been a lot of fun.
I appreciate the time. I appreciate you having me on here. And yeah, I want to flip the question back to you real quick though, because, you know, you had kind of asked me like what got me into cars. I'm curious what got you into cars.
I grew up going to sprint car races in Indiana and Illinois.
Yeah.
Dirt oval stuff. And man, it's like that same click that I think a lot of people got, that you're like, oh man, I'm going to be a car guy at this point. And you just pursue it and you don't let it fizzle out. Like, I won't own a minivan.
Yeah.
But I own the dad van, and that's an excursion on 37s, and that thing can haul all my kids around and everything else. And you start getting that passion. So for me, it was growing up around cars with my dad, my uncle, and then some people in the neighborhood, kind of the same thing. Like, there were certain car spot things that I had that just kind of transitioned me. But I think it's funny because you talked a lot about it tonight. It had to do everything to do with just entrepreneurship, and a lot of people like to throw that term around.
Yeah.
And you hear side hustles, you hear all this. It's not at all what it is. Not even a little bit. It is
passive income. I hate that word.
Amen. No.
Like there's nothing passive about
No,
entrepreneurship.
I'll call anything passive income an annuity because I have to make a financial product out of it. But you start to look at it, and it was about building, pursuing, and watching it grow. And with that, it was always passion with cars to do that.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, I think if at any given point you hear and in my line of work, I see inheritances and I see windfalls and I see everything. But if I could die on my last day spending money on another part for a car, sorry kids, like if I passed anything on to you, is the joy that you saw me have and I got to spend time with you. And it's always been kind of an evolution for that, kind of like building a shop and sharing things and starting this channel. Like it was about, people like, you should start a YouTube channel. You could make a lot of money with that. I'm like, I want to make $0 with that. And Bryce has heard that too. It's like, nope, I only want to hear about what Dylan's story is. And I want to hear about that in depth. And you don't sit down often, I don't think, and explain this whole process, start to finish.
Yeah.
And maybe one day I'll sit down and I'll explain my process more in depth. But for me, it's not a selfish endeavor. It is about like, buddy, I talked to you tonight. I was like, it'd be really cool to have one out of here. But if I never have one, you're invited anytime you want to go drive on the track that I primed up for you today.
I hope you get one. Then we can rip it together.
I would like that.
I need another buddy with a Sierra car.
Twist my arm more. But thank you for coming on. We'll wrap up for tonight, and we'll continue this conversation, especially when you get the Koenigsegg. Would you bring it on for us?
Absolutely.
I would love that.
I'm stoked.
Right. Thanks, sir.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Appreciate it, Dylan.
Yeah.